This is a mid-2011 13-inch Apple MacBook Air. Now, I got this machine off eBay for about $45, and when I got it, it was in non-working condition. Well, mostly non-working condition, I guess I should say. So it did have quite a few issues when I got it. The most significant issue with this machine, which I'll show you in a minute when I take it apart, was that the battery connector on the logic board had been broken off. Now, whoever owned this machine before me did a terrible attempt at soldering it back on, and while I didn't do a great job, I definitely did a much better job than the person originally did on this board, and it does indeed work now that I've re-soldered that connector back on. But this machine also did not come with an SSD, and it did not come. It also had a broken LCD display. So I managed to get a new LCD display, and I did get an SSD for this machine as well because it did not come with one. So after I did all that, this machine is now in fully working condition. So let me just go ahead and start off by giving you an overview of it. So on the top here, you can see that the screen is in pretty good shape. Like I said, this is a new display assembly, so it is in better shape than the original one was on this machine. You can see that there is a dent on this corner right here, but that's about it. The rest of it is pretty much dent-free. There's just a little bit of a sticky residue on here, which I can probably get off pretty easily with some rubbing alcohol. So taking a look at the front here, you can see that it is a very, very thin machine, at least from the front. This is, of course, the new style MacBook Air. It is a little bit thinner than the original style MacBook Air, which came out in 2008. You can see on this side, the bottom of the case is a little bit scuffed up because, of course, this part is original to the machine and the screen is new. Well, not new, but, you know, it's in better shape than the bottom half of the system. So over here you can see we've got a SD card slot, a USB port. These are USB 2.0 ports. This is a 2011 model. And a Thunderbolt port there. On the back, of course, we have nothing but the hinge and the vents. On this side, we've got the MagSafe power connection, the second USB port, and a microphone and headphone port there. So that's basically that. The bottom of the machine is in pretty good shape. It is scratched up a little bit, as you can see, but it's not bad at all. So let's just go ahead and open it up. So you can see in here that the keyboard is actually in pretty good shape. The trackpad's in decent shape as well. And if you take a close look at the keyboard, it's not worn at all, really. It's in remarkably good condition. So as for the screen, you can see the screen is in good shape as well. And the only reason I did get this screen for quite cheap, normally these displays go for about $200 just for the panel. Now, I got this whole assembly for $45. And the only reason it was so cheap was because it just had this sticky residue here, which the listing described as scratches, but that's just a little bit of residue, which I may be able to get off, I'm not sure. But that doesn't bother me at all because the rest of the screen is in perfect shape, and of course it works perfectly fine as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take off the bottom pan of the machine and show you the rework that had to be done on the battery connector. So I'm going to go ahead and get the bottom off and resume the video. Alright, so as you can see, I've now gotten the machine open. So let's go ahead and take a look at the battery connector. Now, as you can see, it doesn't look too good because, unfortunately, the best I could do was what you see here. And the only reason it looks like this is because I could not, the pins that are supposed to go on the bottom of the connector were ripped off, so I couldn't properly solder it to the board like it would have originally been. What I ended up having to do was use a little bits of this LVDS wire, you can see right here, to connect each of the pins to their pad. So if I go ahead and show you this from this side, let's see if I can, you can see it a little better. Yeah, you can kind of see that I had to run wires down from each pin of the battery connector to the appropriate pad on the motherboard. Now, the reason you see this wire here is because you may be able to see it if you look really close in there. the pad for this pin was actually missing. So whoever ripped this off the board actually ripped that pad off the board as well. Now, that pad unfortunately was part of the SMC detection for the battery, so that pin had to be hooked up to the board. So I ended up having to find a schematic for this board online, and I found one component on the back of the board that one of the pins was connected to the same rail as this pad. So I went ahead and used this jumper wire to jumper the pin from the connector to the appropriate pad on the motherboard, and that fixed the battery connector completely, and it now works perfectly fine. So after I managed to fix the battery connector, when I booted up the machine with a battery connected, it actually ran like extremely slow, and I mean slow to the point where you would move your finger over the trackpad and the cursor would lag on the screen. And I actually found out that whoever originally had this machine installed the battery for a mid-2010 model MacBook Air. Now, those batteries have different model numbers. You can see that this one is model A1405, and this is, of course, the battery that's needed for the 2011 model MacBook Air. But someone had originally installed a older mid-2010 compatible battery, and I read online, and at first I thought there was something wrong with the logic board causing it to run slow, because that can happen sometimes as a result of water damage. Now, this board was not water damaged, so I was pretty hesitant to think that was the issue. So after doing a little bit of research online, I found that the battery I had was the wrong one. So what I went ahead and did was I just ordered a new battery off eBay for the 2011 MacBook Air, put it in, and sure enough, that fixed the issue entirely. And then the last thing I had to buy for this machine was the SSD. Now, this is a 64 gig SSD, and the only reason I got that small of an SSD was just because it was cheap. But this machine would have originally come with a 128 gig SSD. But the 64 gig SSD is more than enough space that I need for what I'm going to use this machine for. So that worked out perfectly fine. So overall, I think I spent a little over $100 on the repair of this machine, or a little over $100 on this machine, plus what I spent on parts. So yeah, nonetheless, it is a very good deal for a mid-2011 MacBook Air, especially a 13-inch model, because they seem to be a little bit more expensive than the 11-inch model. So yeah, that is the repair of this machine. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is put the bottom pan back on, and we'll go ahead and boot it up. So I'll be right back. Alright, so as you can see, I've now gotten the bottom pan reinstalled to the machine. So let's just go ahead and open it up and power it on. So as you can see, it powers on just fine off the battery, and it is now booting. So as you can see, it does boot up rather quickly off the SSD, as you would expect. So in a couple of seconds here, we should be booted up. Alright, so as you can see, I have installed macOS Sierra on this machine, and I am planning on... The only reason I really installed Sierra is just because I needed it for certain things that I'm going to be doing with this machine. Yeah, normally I would install Mavericks on my daily use machines because that is my favorite version of OS X, but yeah, Sierra isn't too bad. So as you can see, we are running version 10.12.3, which is the latest version as of today. You can see that it is a 13-inch mid-2011 model. It's got a 1.7 gigahertz Intel Core i5 CPU, 4 gigs of DDR3 memory, and that is, of course, soldered on the motherboard, so I can't upgrade it. It has Intel HD Graphics 3000. It is the Sandy Bridge platform. And yeah, so let's go into the storage tab here. So yeah, you can see that it is quite a small SSD, and it will fill up quite fast, but for what I'm going to use this machine for, that really doesn't matter, and this should be more than enough space. So under the Displays tab, you can see that it has a 1440 by 900 LCD panel. Now the 13-inch MacBook Air, which of course has the same size screen, or not MacBook Air, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which has the same size screen, only has a 1280 by 800 resolution. Now that resolution is way too small for a 13-inch screen. All the UI elements are really big, and there isn't really that much screen real estate with a 1280 by 800 resolution. So the 1440 by 900 resolution on this machine is definitely very, very nice to use. So let's just go ahead into, actually I think that's about it. So yeah, this machine runs very, very well off the SSD, and of course the Core i5 CPU in this thing is pretty fast. So yeah, that is the overview of this mid-2011 13-inch Apple MacBook Air. Hope you enjoyed this video.